Welcome to the Wile Karting Mill Museum, where the water-powered wheel operated the karting machines, so that in 1880s, these machines actually turned out as much as 25,000 pounds of carded fleece a year for the local farmers. The water wheel itself weighs 3,000 pounds. The water wheel here today was actually replaced by the Nova Scotia Museum in 1973 when they restored the building. It was originally made of pine. Today it is made of hemlock. It runs on the original Babbitt bearing that was here in 1860. The dimensions of the wheel are 9 feet in diameter and 5.5 feet wide. 2 gears, one smaller one on the other side of the wheel and a larger gear that runs the diameter of the wheel, if engaged, would turn the shafts that would in turn turn the belts and the pulleys that run the karting machines. It could generate up to 7 horsepower in the 1860s. If you step back this way, this is a photograph of the wheel to show you the condition in 1973 before the Nova Scotia Museum built the replica. If you look closely, you can see the gears that actually they thought if they engaged them in 1968 would still have run the karting machines. Notice the ties or the straps that were actually wiring the buckets together. In 1968, Vernon Wile, the grandson of the owner Dean Wile, was still karting fleece here on a part-time basis for farmers in the area. The Wile Karting Mill was not the only industry that was situated along Sandy Brook that used the water power that was available to them. There were several other industries owned by different families. For example, Vino Wagon Factory was just downstream. Bridgewater Foundry was downstream as well. The Waterman Tanning Factory was just upstream. And Dean Wile himself opened a grist mill and a sawmill as well on the same site. However, later in 1880, he realized the karting business was much more profitable, so he closed those 2 businesses. There was also a sawmill run by the Whitman family that was further upstream. All these families, sharing the same source of water, created a lot of legal issues. There were many court cases over legal rights, water usage, and water power. So much so that the whole area from 1860 up to 1899 was referred to as Sebastopol. Sebastopol refers to a siege in the Crimean War in the 1850s where the bickering was so nasty that this area actually became known as Sebastopol for that length of time, right up until Bridgewater was incorporated in 1899. I want to show you where the water enters the mill. This is called the sluiceway. The water flows between those 2 posts under the gate, and a 5-foot path of water comes underneath the floorboards upstairs and drops down on top of the water wheel downstairs. The crank is actually the original crank back to 1860, and when the crank is turned, the gate raises and the water flows down to the wheel. The water wheel would have been opened at 6 in the morning and would not have been shut off throughout the day until the business closed, 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock, because they did card wool 12 to 15 hours a day in the 1880s. The number of industries in this area and the water right issues certainly speak to the importance of water power and water wheels in the mid-1800s.